So the 22nd of October 2004 was the date when we first held the street action in the Brick Lane area against the big business agenda fronted by the Crossrail project, which was being peddled and touted for by the then corrupt clique in place in the name of the London Borough of Tower Hamlets community, based at the Tower Hamlets Council. And our focus of the demand was summed up in that demonstration and in its coverage, published historically 2 days ahead of the actual demonstration. We held the demonstration on the Friday, the 22nd of October 2004. And the local paper still in circulation, not anymore, which is owned by the Newham Recorder, Tower Hamlets Recorder, published a front page splash, anger of a community against the Crossrail whole plot. And we shall be stating more updates and analysis and comparisons about the campaign in the next 24 hours and beyond. Because the coverage showed that even the otherwise ignorant and racist kind of quote editors at the Tower Hamlets Recorder were convinced of the strength of support that we had mobilized against the Crossrail hole in Brick Lane and in the East End of London. It was unparalleled because we had not yet held a demonstration. That was 2 days ahead of the demonstration. And a day before the demonstration, which was the Thursday, today's date, 21st of October 2004, the title owned by Archant and officially known as the East London Advertiser, which we call East London Idiotizer in relation to everything else that it has been doing wrong. Even that one was forced to publish the news in advance on this, again, a splash, front page splash. So both of them, these are owned separately, and yet they came to the same conclusion that for that particular week, the most important event was our campaign against the Crossrail hole. And not only that, the focus of our anger on behalf of the community on the role of the Tower Hamlets Council, as personified by, incidentally, Lutfur Rahman's colleague, Abbas Uddin Elias Halal, who was a leader of the council in collusion with the agenda of the Crossrail whole plot against Brick Lane. Historic and a telling and a stunning kind of example, one of hundreds that we have created uniquely in the and by the movement defending the community in the East End of London the last 57 years. When we started defending the East End of London on the 13th of June, 1963. So there is nothing comparable to the Kudila campaign that any other campaign has done in the last 17 years. And also nothing comparable on a scale in terms of extrapolating the principle. Anyone who is familiar with our Facebook account and also the account on the Twitter will know that we support campaign against HS2. We oppose HS2. Now, when we started opposing HS2, most people who are now known as posting almost daily opposition to HS2 were not known as being active. So we don't just confine our activities on our campaign to the physical boundaries of Tower Hamlets or East London, but we have spread it across the country, United Kingdom. And when necessary, in international principles, international human rights values, we expand it across the globe, as we have been doing since the end of September 2020, after the gang rape that took place in the Silot MC College. Now, that is not the only time, but we have the record of supporting campaigns for objective values, nothing to do with any particular political party or group or grouping. Now, in saying that in the last 17 years, nothing has been seen in the east end of London or any part of London that has received the same kind of community support. We mobilized the support on behalf of the community. Most of the community was not out on the street, but we created such a powerful organizational presence for 6 years that the Tower Hamlets Council crooks and the daft at the UK Central Department at the expense of transport and the kind of prime minister in place, whoever it was, were not in any doubt as to the solidity of our argument and the rock solid, invincible opposition that we had created to the big business idea and narrative. Now, this being 21st of October 2020, we are talking now 2004, 17 years ago, actually, calendar-wise. And we had said the Crossrail thing was wrong. Now, they were saying every single one of the touts employed by the big business through the Tower Hamlets Council was saying that Crossrail would bring benefits to the east end of London. And they now completely quiet these liars. They're silent, these liars, these touts. They're not leaders, never have been leaders. And they have not had any clue as to what the community is about, the community needs and community's prospects and community's rights and needs. Crossrail is yet to come operational 1 year from now. That is 4 years already behind. But when it comes to operation, it will be another railway line, nothing to do with any of the benefits that the liars were wrongly and dishonestly uttering it would bring to the east end of London or to East London or to Tower Hamlets or to Brick Lane. And we shall be, of course, updating chapter and verse in due course. Now back to today's front page. This is the morning paper, that is the Metro, which is, we have said that Boris Johnson is painted as the bummer on the front page of the next or the new edition of Private Eye. And this Metro, Tear and Loathing. Now, Tear and Loathing actually is owned by the kind of one of the main Fleet Street groups. But this is in detail kind of updated on by Private Eye as the paper that both the Daily Mail and the son, Murdoch's son, are being exposed in Private Eye, the Street of Shame. The Street of Shame is the column that has Private Eye's take on the various corruption and lying and the opportunism and dishonesty of Fleet Street papers. Private Eye doesn't discuss the Fleet Street racism, we hasten to add. So they're saying in Hackworth how both the Daily Mail and the kind of Murdoch Sun are now coming to their kind of commercial senses topically. They will change their tune, no doubt, without any notice. But this is what this issue of Private Eye is recording. And it said that when Boris Johnson was elected as Conservative leader and Prime Minister last year, that is 2019, there were plenty of people ready to point out that he lacked the character, temperament, talent, or principles to make a success of the job. That is Private Eye's introduction to the Hackworth, the penny drops. That is, they're now realizing how unfit, unsuitable, useless, and dishonest Boris Johnson is. But there were also those who firmly believed otherwise. That is, they didn't pay any heed or attention to the warnings that Boris Johnson was not right for the job of Prime Minister. And the Private Eye, in a kind of subtle kind of irony, says, how is that working out for them? Transitioned Daily Mail. Now bring us sunshine. Daily Mail front page after Johnson's victory in leadership election, 24th of July 2019. And then the next one is rejoice. Boris surges to landslide win. Daily Mail front page after Johnson's victory in general election. And the Daily Mail dated the day after the election, which is the 13th of December 2019. And then it says, Mr. Doom, back to the bad old days. No more pain and damage, Prime Minister. Daily Mail, front page, 1 to 12 October 2020. Daily Mail front pages over 11 days. Eclipse of the sun. Boris Johnson is the right man to be our new Prime Minister. Britain needs Boris in Downing Street at this crucial point in our history. He projects optimism and determination, the perfect antidote to the last 3 years of Brexit agony. They were denouncing Theresa May, of course. Sun says, leader column, 22nd of July 2019. We are disheartened to see Boris Johnson following Nicola Sturgeon down the road to ruin. Our politicians believe they are doing the right thing to protect life. We get that. But they must strike a balance between that and avoiding national ruin. We don't believe they are paying nearly enough attention to the latter. Sun says in the leader column, 8th of October 2020. Now, we have said before that Trevor Kavanagh, the Scottish origin, complete liar and poison career, Brexiteer racist, we call him evil Kavanagh because he is the personification of evil. Now the Hackworth in the Private Eye has got the headline to Kavanagh cavils. Now, in an otherwise tedious Tory week, one startling promise stood out like a sunbeam in a dreary sky. An ode to joy, you might say. I'm going to be different sort of Prime Minister. Boris Johnson told the Sun on Sunday. For the last 3 years, we've had nothing but a diet of miserabilism. We can't do this, we can't do that. Computer says no. And it's really wretched. He vowed to end the diet of misery inflicted by Theresa May and reverse the depressing hash she made of Brexit. Millions of Sun readers across this island nation will shout, "Hear, hear." Trevor Kavanagh, The Sun, 8th of July 2019. Now here is the same terrible Kavanagh. Which way will Boris jump today? His instincts may be to scrap the 10 o'clock curfew, relax the rule of six, and breathe the life back into our throttled economy. Yet leaks suggest the Prime Minister will keep his boot on our windpipe, blight the hospitality industry, and put thousands more innocent workers out of a job. If so, we are doomed to a stop-go, slow-motion slide into bankruptcy as cash-strapped shops, pubs, and restaurants finally give up the ghost. Farms, jobs, and young people's life chances will go to the wall. Trevor Kavanagh, The Sun, 12th of October 2020. And it goes on listing, but there is another dreadful one. Complete poisonous racist, Welsh-born racist liar, misleadingly named Alison Pearson. Shall not be even quoting Alison Pearson. So the liars that are now confessing that they completely lied as they peddled Boris Johnson's ability and kind of inevitability and fitness and all the rest of it are confessing now. This is only the beginning. We say in this program that Kudilar campaign had been publishing evidentially, nothing else, evidentially our commentary on Boris Johnson being wrongly promoted for any public job, public office. And we date back to 2007. So Boris Johnson was unfit in 2007 before he got any public, really, office, because it was a year before, before a year before he got in as the mayor at the expense of London. And we published as far as Boris Johnson is concerned and his unsuitability, unfitness for the public office, and in the context of Britain and what this country needed, we published in Oxford as well, because some of the publications promoting him occurred in Oxford. So we published in Oxford various publications, Oxford Mail and Oxford Cheryl and Cheryl, whatever the name of the student newspaper is. And also we published a series of objections and analytical comments on the website of the Daily Boris Graph and the Daily Evening No Standard in 2007 onwards. So it has taken almost 16 years for the Daily Mail and the scum to recognize that Boris Johnson was never fit for public office and he was not to be trusted. And now they're admitting it. So we say that given that evidence, everything else we are saying about the papers today is based on evidence, and that we are not motivated by any agenda, party, political or similar. Only objective truth and only based on what we believe evidentially to be the best interests of the country, society, and the community, including the East End of London. Now here, on page 4 of the Metro today, there is a headline which is absolutely self-evident. speaks for itself. It says, Boris has lied about helping us, say young conservatives. It's not some Jeremy Corbyn supporters. These are not Muslims that Boris Johnson has condemned and libeled and defamed. Here is the piece that the young conservatives are saying that Boris Johnson has lied to them. And what we said about the campaign against Crossrail that we mounted, every single thing we did against Crossrail was based on evidence. Every single assertion we made was made after thorough, absolutely factual, evidential research and fact checks. And everything we said has been proven right. Now, there is no campaign, including those various locally based campaigners across the planned HS2 line that are publishing various stuff about against HS2. They have not done what we have done. Not that they have not been publishing any facts, they have been, but their publication of the facts are in context a very tiny fraction of the amount and the volume and the frequency of the publication that should take place, and that hasn't been taking place. And in saying that we did all of those, whereas these other campaigners have not been able to do it or have not been seen doing it so far, has to be understood in the overall context of resource necessary, resource at all levels, resource to do the research, resource to be able to do the research, the freedom, resource, freedom to do the research and the campaign is the most important resource. And the Timeless Council, while it was lying for the big business agenda, Crossrail, was lying for the kind of attacks that the likes of the Royal London Hospital mounted in the community in Stepney in 1987, when the Royal London Hospital launched a campaign of harassment and eviction, mass eviction, in retaliation to the tenants and residents and occupants who had complained of poor repair to the properties that legally Royal London Hospital owned the freehold interest in. Now, today's newspapers, of course, are about the Manchester kind of standoff between Greater Manchester Mayor Andy Barnum and other northern kind of area council representatives and even some mayors, local mayors, and Boris Johnson fronted cabal. And what Johnson is showing in this particular kind of standoff is that he has no respect for the people of the North. And the fact that it is Andy Barnum who has been consistently kind of objecting to Johnson's various lies and inadequacies in terms of addressing the very important, significant resource requirements of the people of Greater Manchester and other areas affected. The fact that it is Andy Barnum who is doing it and not Keir Starmer, if he is doing it now at the question time, then we have not been noticing this because we are doing this program. So he's done If he has done the question time in the last half hour, we shall be updating on that in due course. But the point is that in the newspapers in Fleet Street, the main COVID-19 kind of confrontation is between Boris Johnson and Greater Manchester Council. Greater Manchester Mayor and the councils that are covered by the Greater Manchester Mayor kind of post on the designation of Greater Manchester. Now, any comparison between the role of the Tower Hamlets Council in supporting Crossrail and the role of these councils in opposing something similar to Crossrail, let's say central government initiative. They are opposing. These local councils that are covered by Greater Manchester are opposing a government move, the central government move, which is just about the right balance, because that is where they are based and they should be defending the local communities. Tower Hamlets Council, on the other hand, acted as parasites and touts for the central government project at that time. And it was carrying out touting jobs to tell the people, the community affected, targeted by the attacks by central government, that they should be grateful for the attacks. Think about that. So we say that the people of Manchester, Greater Manchester, and the Liverpool area, North and Newcastle, are doing the correct thing, speaking up for their own areas. But that reflection of the actual activity of the opposition is not to be found in the Fleet Street papers. Even the I newspaper is not reflecting the depth of the opposition to Johnson by the people of the North. And this is vindicating the general democratic diagnostic kind of equation that we had actually made, that if you are locally based and if you are based in a local area which then comes under attack from a central government, then your duty is to stand against the attack and stand with the people in the community, or stand with the campaigners who represent the opposition on behalf of the community. So we here refer back again to the 1921 position taken by the popular councillors. They took the position on behalf of the electors in Poplar who were being targeted by UK central government in 1921. And the councillors did the right thing. Now it's 99 years since that happened. And in those 99 years, no other council anywhere, not in London, not in any other part of England or any other part of the UK, has come across taking a similar stand. Not by a long stalk, not by a long measure. And to find the example similar to what the Northern Council leaders and Northern Councils are representing their communities by saying, is to be found 200 years ago in Peterloo. Peterloo is in Greater Manchester. Look up Peterloo. And so what we're saying about the campaigns, any campaign to be worth the name campaign, worth the description campaign, has one unique characteristic about it. And what is that? It is beyond party politics. It is beyond career. It is beyond opportunism. And it is universally understandable and identifiable as based on universal values and principles. They crushed the people of Liverpool, Peterloo, 200 years ago, as they jailed the popular councillors 99 years ago. But none of the crushers in power at the time, or the jailers of the popular councillors, sitting as judges in the High Court in London, nobody knows who they are. Well, the records will, of course, reveal their names, but nobody understands anything about them. That their position was completely is not recognized in the rigorous campaigning ethical memory that exists, the memory that we share. It is the popular councillors. They are remembered with fondness and solidarity that transcends decades, transcends 100 years difference. Similarly, the martyrs of Peterloo, we remember them. Universal values. We don't remember the police who attacked them. We don't remember anyone else in power that ordered the police to attack the protesters. But we remember the Peterloo protesters. Now, look at the time span. And what are the Fleet Street papers doing about the attack on the North that Johnson has been mounting the last week? They are not really bothered. The Sun is not bothered. And we shall come to the Sun even more in detail later. The Sun has got no, so far we cannot find any double page spread, or even single page spread by the Sun about the. We have found one on pages 10 and 11. And they're doing it, this two-page spread in typically dishonest scum way. They are not coming across at all as siding with the people of the North. They're painting, even there, they're painting Johnson as the enforcer. So the Sun is in denial, continues to be in denial. And the Sun is not making itself any less hated than it has been for the last 30 years in the North, especially in the Liverpool area. And unbelievably, the Sun is calling Len McCluskey one of Jeremy Corbyn's racists. Now, that is a 50 level of lies by the racist scum. Of course, Len McCluskey is a racist, as is Jeremy Corbyn. But as compared with the Murdoch scum, their racism is far less nefarious. That is the distinction we make. But they're running a editorial about anti-Semite McCluskey. And they are putting the editorial in defense of Peter Mandelson. It says anti-Semitism was never far from the surface with many senior Corbynites. So it is depressing but unsurprising that unite the trade unions. Len McCluskey would tell Peter Mandelson, whose dad was Jewish, to go home and count his gold. Without voters' good sense, Jeremy Corbyn might have established the first institutionally anti-Semitic government with Red Len pulling its strings. A genuinely chilling thought even now. And what is happening with the other bits about the editorial in the Sun is they are having a second editorial against the European Union. The first one is about Starmer, because they're focusing on Starmer silence rather than Boris Johnson's attacks across the people of the North. So this is the kind of corrupt Sun that is still peddling and pandering to Boris Johnson. And we shall come to discuss more of this scum today when we discuss the piece about the Times Radio. Times Radio is the radio kind of outlet apparently started by Murdoch's own Times and the scum, the newspapers. And the piece in the new Private Eye says that Murdoch is not impressed by the contents and the role of the Times Radio. And we shall be reading that one because it is very important. Topic-wise, not the contents only, but the topic-wise. And it says Radio Rupert. That is the bit in the bottom, Radio Rupert. And it is saying that the front of last Thursday's Times newspaper, owned by Murdoch, of course, was dominated by a large photo of Bill Bryson. Now, Bill Bryson is an American who has been kind of milking his co-racist in Fleet Street and in the BBC for a long time as a successful friend of England, American friend of England. And he has been financially more kind of rewarded and platform-wise than Janet, the other one, the Janet that does the service in the Boris graph. Anyway, so this is going back to the front of last Thursday's Times was dominated by a large photo of Bill Bryson. Question: why was he news? Answer: because the genial author had told Times Radio he looked forward to spending more time with his grandchildren in retirement. Hold the front page! Exclamation mark. Almost everything on Times Radio is fascinating and newsworthy in the opinion of the Times. But it seems the proprietor is less impressed. While Rupert Murdoch was in London 2 weeks ago, he told executives he had made a point of listening to the radio station during his visit. The digger's verdict: it's a load of old crap. Why are you wasting my money on it? Said Rupert Murdoch. Now, some of the recipients of the Murdoch Times Radio Money are indeed surprising names. Some of them pretend to be kind of critical of Murdoch and the tabloid paper and the tabloid agenda. But that is a point about the lack of kind of character and integrity among so many of Fleet Street's kind of professional journalists, so-called. And there is a piece in the Times. I think there was a piece in the Times or by the Times website yesterday about John Santamo, the Ugandan-born Archbishop of York, who is now being lined up for a belated kind of push back into the House of Peers. Now, we have discussed the Ugandan-born John Santamo more than once before on the Kudila campaign's platforms. And we have also included references to his stupidity and ignorance about Asian people during his time as the Bishop of Stepney, which was the last possible kind of combination that the morons in charge of appointing bishops in the kind of English archbishops kind of bureaucracy. In the period 1999 to 2000, just as he was about to kind of finish his ill-appointed tenure or stint at the Stepney as Bishop of Stepney, John Santamo appeared during a kind of do held in the Altavali Park. And the do was not anything to do with the local community, but it was one of those impositions that are kind of geographically foisted in a choreographed way that gives the physical impression of being somewhere which is surrounded by people of many diverse faith groups and ethnicity and all the other things. That was the idea for staging that event at the Altavali Park. Not only to abuse the name Altavali and to suggest that it was done by a group or groups that were opposed to racism, but it was also to stage within the locality so that the people would be misrepresented as being represented by them, by the organizers. And it proved to be the correct kind of behavior or activities, as John Santamo made a very stupid and totally ignorant comment about Indians, Pakistanis, and Bangladeshis. As far as our campaign is concerned, we don't know of anyone from the Bangladeshi or Indian or Pakistani kind of backgrounds in Tower Hamlets who became a Christian by changing their own original religion. So therefore, at that event, nobody was there as a converted Christian. Anyone who was there from any of the three communities would have been there out of curiosity, because the Altavali Park is based in a kind of area which is quite open, and people can walk into the park and just listen or hear or observe or see things going on. But Santamo was so stupid in his remark against the Bangladeshis, the Indians, the Pakistanis, and Asians, that one Indian woman, who I think is dead now, but she was alive at the time and she was attending that thing. She came from Madhya Pradesh. And she had been in London for decades, and she was also an active member of the Black Media Association, etc., etc. So she knew the communities in London. So she stood up and condemned John Santamo and his ignorance. This is important. This is world exclusive update, because the Times this week has said that Santamo was left out of the list of the kind of peers that are going to be kind of appointed this year or currently for some kind of minor issue. So what they are saying is the Santamo deserves to be made a member of the House of Peers, where he sat for years as in the capacity of the post of Archbishop of York, but not in his personal capacity. This time, this peerage will be in his personal capacity. Now, Santamo has been the single most over promoted African, directly African kind of member of the ethnic surrogates and kind of stoogeocracy. I mean, I knew him long before he became anything to do with the Church of England as a kind of hierarchy. He was a local church vicar in the South London. And when I met him, nothing to do with the Church of the Faith group, but as part of the investigation that I was carrying out into fact checking on the veracity of various statements made by various personnel about racism. When I sat there in his place, whatever the place was, that was in the 1980s, I found Santamo as dishonest and as ignorant as I found him later, 20 years or 15 years later, to be in the Alta Bali Park. So why do the Church of England bureaucracy think that Santamo deserves to be a member of the House of Peers in his good personal capacity? The answer is completely irrelevant, because most of such members in the House of Peers are pointlessly there, and they're parasites, and they're not genuine independent campaigner against any injustice, really. And Santamo himself, while at York, was condemned for his role in staying silent, in effect, about serious child sex abuse that had gone on beforehand. And while he was silent, he was expected to be vocal and demanding justice for the victims of the child sex abuses that went on in that territory, even before he was in post. So Santamo is an exhibit. What Theresa May kind of latched onto quite dishonestly as the diversity deficit. Santamo is a kind of polyfiller. I mean, he's a space filler. He can be installed, and he can serve as an exhibit. He looks black, literally black colored, black skinned, and that to the racists is as good as having substance against racism, which are two different things. But the racists want to perpetuate that myth and the lie. Now, on the question of lifting the eviction ban, there has been nothing in the main papers about the ban on evictions being lifted. So here is a follow-up of sorts in the Private Eye, New Eye. So this update is about Section 21 and the lying by the conservatives about the benefit that removing the ban would bring to victims of domestic abuse. It is like the Crossrail touts for the Crossrail whole agenda or big business agenda promoted by Crossrail, who said that the Crossrail would bring benefits to the Eastern and especially to Tower Hamlets, saying, and they were completely in denial, absolutely in denial of the destruction, physical destruction that the plot to dig a hole in Brick Lane would cause to the community. Remember, these towers are mostly, almost all of them, Bangladeshis. And Brick Lane is synonymous with the Bangladeshi community in the whole world. The world outside of Bangladesh itself, the only place in any part of the world for the Bangladeshis that is next to, in terms of familiarity and quote original kind of background and ancestry and whatever, it is Brick Lane. It's the second home outside of Bangladesh. In the all of Europe, there is no such place in the whole of the Gulf areas in the States, nor in the USA, nor in Australia, nor in New Zealand, nor in Canada. These are the countries that are supposed to be connected with the so-called Commonwealth fronted by Brenda. Now, these Bangladeshi councillors have been silent all this time that the Crossrail project has been messed up and being completely exposed as dysfunctional in terms of the narrative and everything. All these councillors who posed for photographs by standing near the still unopened Crossrail station in Whitechapel, they have gone quiet. They have no sense, no self-respect, no understanding, and there is no shame. So these are not democratic representatives of the community only because the votes that they get by flaunting their ethnic affiliation with the voters comes mainly from the Bangladeshi voters. And there is nothing in the local East London idiotizer about the disaster of the Crossrail project. And there is no mention by the crooks that are now publishing the so-called East London idiotizer print form or online that we said, the Kudilar campaign said, everything we said has come true. We said, one of the most centrally important things we said against Crossrail was that in London, the existing railway infrastructure, the railway infrastructure in London is essentially underground, but there are some kind of overland kind of lines and tributaries. But essentially the main length of the underground system is what the London kind of railway network is about. And we said that the repeated claims made by the UK Department for Transport, which is daft, and we shall talk about Chris Grayling and the serial incompetence and stupidity and wastefulness of the daft organization. Coincidentally, Private Lie also calls it daft, but we call it daft irrespective of whether Private Eye started calling it daft before we did. It doesn't matter because we are basing calling DFT daft entirely based on the evidence of his incompetence and corruption. Now, the newspapers today are not talking about Manchester, not anything like the Manchester kind of area people or the northern people are saying. but they are only making token kind of. Now this is the metro, and this is the one that we're going to diagnose right now. The main pictures are of Andy Barnum and Manchester City Council leader Richard Lees. And the smaller picture is of Boris Johnson. So 22 million package for Manchester branded brutal by Barnum as lockdown imposed on city. Boris Johnson has forced Greater Manchester into a brutal, indefinite lockdown, Mayor Andy Barnum declared last night. He spoke out after more than a week of talks broke down, with local leaders refusing the government's final offer of 60 million in extra assistance, insisting 65 million was the minimum they could accept. Now, going back to what we've been saying about local councils, and then we'll come back to this week's kind of impasse on the standoff. We have said that the local councils across England, regardless of any particular political color of the majority of the elected persons who constitute council in each area for the period concerned, that the local councils are not democratic representatives of the community. And we have to say that now, because the local councils are not accountable to the community. They're not accountable to the communities, and they're not accountable to the individuals who need the services that are only deliverable by the local councils. So individuals, families, couples, groups, none of the people who need services, essential services, these are not kind of luxuries, essential services to be delivered to them in time, on time, as based on the needs. And that is the kind of arrangement or the settlement of the kind of delivery of the services, various services between the central government and the local councils, which are also called local government. And that is the reason, because they are the local extension of the governance of this country by central government. And we have said that their only kind of time comes when they become vocal about anything, which is to make big claims and big noise about money and resources that are then explained to them as explanation, explained by them to the public as the explanation for any deficit or lack of quality or standard of service by the council concerned. And the COVID-19 need for various lockdowns and other measures which have brought this relationship and this dynamic into sharp focus in the last, let's say, 1 week's kind of news coverage shows that councils are only vocal when it is money that they want in the name of their locality, money from the central government. Now, we are by no means arguing that they don't need the money, or they should not make the noise that they have been making, or that they made too big a claim, 65 million across the Greater Manchester area. We are not saying any of that is wrong. We are supporting that in the context, but we are adding. There is no evidence, there is no example, there is no time, there is no period, there is no illustration of any period in the last 100 years, whatever form the local councils were, because they have been changed in the last 100 years from various forms into the current forms that they are in. The local councils are not tribunes of local democracies, which is what the Times editorial, which launched the personality of Andy Barnum on the 14th of October, kind of called them. They're not tribunes. They should be, but they're not. So when they're not tribunes on all the other issues, housing, crime, criminality, antisocial behavior, corruption, councillor corruption, that is where most of the problems in society, in the communities, actually exist and are perpetuated. And that is where the Fleet Street papers, reluctantly acknowledging Andy Barnum, who deserves this particular coverage because of his role in terms of speaking as the mayor of Greater Manchester on behalf of the 10 councils that Greater Manchester covers. That is fine. That is absolutely correct. But before this pandemic, and between his first election as mayor of Greater Manchester and this pandemic, did Andy Barnum come across or come over in the media as being disenchanted, kind of impressed by the absence of accountability by the councils to their electorates and their communities, individuals, families, couples, and groups? No. And that is the gap that we are pointing out. And this rebellion, the Daily Mail says Boris Johnson is going to face, the rebellion is already underway. Because and the front page of the Daily Mail has got a shameless kind of contradictory piece by Michael Gove's wife, Sarah Bain. The Daily Mail remains completely dishonest even today. And that is the purpose of that finding is the purpose of our diagnosis. As I have said, we have been diagnosing the British press, more or less Fleet Street, BBC, and to later extent ITV, and much later Sky News. And in between, we of course have been doing the diagnosis of Channel 4 News. Essentially, the British press is still painted by the kind of peddlers that think that this is still a liberating kind of culture, telling the truth about what is going on in government and telling the truth to the people and the public. This is the level that they sell it on. It's a marketing kind of ploy, but it's nefariously anti-democratic. And the evidence is that despite the fact that they call themselves free press, and that is the press that gives freedom of speech, the platform, the space, they are completely restrictive of the freedom deserved by campaigners for freedom and justice and against corruption. There is no space for the campaigners in these papers, Fleet Street. It is absolutely like it's a kind of silent majority is the majority that is not being given the space by the minority that controls the Fleet Street papers. It's not the Fleet Street newspapers are constituents of what is called the fourth estate. The church, the monarchy, the parliament, and the press. These are the four estates of the state. And the fourth estate is supposed to be transparently exposing and reporting what is going on in the other three estates, but it doesn't. And that is why we have got this crime. 12 billion pounds given to Dido Harding's corrupt outfit. Now 12 billion is 12,000 million pounds. What is 65 million out of that? It's not, it's not even kind of worth measuring. 65 million in 12,000 million is nothing. In fact, the amount of money that and the resource that the northern countries, meaning the areas affected by the not only virus but the lack of resources, lack of capacity, that should be in the billions. In the billions. In fact, the 12 billion should be divided half into the southern England and half to the northern areas. Now, I am saying that, this Kudilar campaign is saying that, Andy Barnum is not saying that, not a single MP is saying that. The fact that they are MPs and they are Greater Manchester Mayor or the leader of the opposition does not make it the priority, whatever they are saying. Whatever the needs are, whatever the evidence says is what we are saying. So therefore we are saying morally, ethically, evidentially, a more pressing and more real thing. Now the 12 billion pounds should be spent equally and should be shared between the north and the south, and the money should be solely used to deliver the services that are needed but are not being delivered. And Dido Harding should be sacked and prosecuted for other thefts that her co-criminals and co-sponsors have allowed her to commit. And those criminals must be prosecuted as well, including David Cameron. And the criminal behavior by Boris Johnson in giving Dido Harding the 12 billion should be treated as a crime by Boris Johnson, who should be done the similar thing that goes on in the USA. When an office holder does the wrong thing, they are impeached. That is to say, a charge is brought against them, and the parliament examines the charge. Boris Johnson should be tried by parliament, first of all, for lying. Billion-pound, multi-billion pound lying. And with him must be charged Hancock and other liars in post. And the fact that Boris Johnson has allowed his own father, Stanley Johnson, and Dominic Cummings, and others exemptions, impunities from the same law by kind of compliance with the law on lockdown. That the rest of society has been penalized for not complying with. Boris Johnson should be prosecuted for that as well. So we shall be continuing in part C.